Margaret Ellis was 73 years old, and she lived alone in a small house on the edge of Millbrook, a quiet little town in rural Tennessee where everybody knew everybody, but nobody really checked on anybody. Her husband, Donald, had passed away 4 years earlier. Heart attack. Sudden. No warning. One morning, he was sitting at the kitchen table drinking his coffee and reading the paper, and by noon he was gone. After Donald died, Margaret's world got very small. Her daughter lived in Portland, Oregon, nearly 2,000 miles away. They talked on the phone every Sunday, but phone calls don't fix a leaking roof. Phone calls don't carry groceries. Phone calls don't sit with you at the kitchen table when the house feels too quiet and the nights feel too long. Margaret had a small savings account that she and Donald had built together over 40 years of careful living. But medical bills from Donald's final weeks had eaten through most of it. And now, on a fixed retirement income, every single dollar had a job to do. She budgeted everything: bread, eggs, electricity, the small bottle of arthritis medicine she needed every morning just to open her hands. There was no extra. There was no cushion. There was just enough. Barely. And on a cold Tuesday morning in October, even that was slipping away. Margaret had walked to the corner store that morning, something she did every Tuesday because she refused to stop moving, refused to become one of those people who just sat in a chair and waited for time to pass. She had $12 in her coat pocket. That was all she had left until her next check came in 4 days. She bought a small loaf of bread and a can of soup. $2 gone, and started her walk back home. That's when she saw him. His name was Ray Coulter. He was 44 years old, broad-shouldered, with a thick gray beard and a leather jacket that had seen better decades. His motorcycle, a big old Harley-Davidson, was pulled off to the side of the road, and he was crouched down next to it with the kind of look on his face that every rider knows. That helpless, frustrated, defeated look of a bike that just quit on you in the middle of nowhere. Ray had been riding from Memphis to visit his brother in Knoxville. He'd ridden this route 100 times. But this time, something went wrong. The bike started sputtering about a mile outside of Millbrook, and by the time he coasted to a stop, it was completely dead. His phone was at 4% battery. His wallet had been stolen at a gas station. 2 hours back, he hadn't even realized it until he reached into his pocket and felt nothing. No cash, no card, just a useless leather fold of emptiness. He had called his brother, that used 4% down to 1, and his brother was coming. But it was going to be at least 2 hours. And Ray was sitting on the side of a road in a town he didn't know, hungry, cold, and completely stuck. Margaret almost walked past him. She almost told herself it wasn't her business, that she couldn't afford to get involved, that she needed those $10 more than a big, tough-looking biker did. But she stopped. She looked at him, really looked at him, and she didn't see a tough biker. She saw a tired man who was having a really bad day. She saw someone who looked the same way. Donald used to look when things went wrong, and he didn't want to admit he needed help. She walked over. "You okay, honey?" she asked. Ray looked up, clearly embarrassed. "Yes, ma'am. Just waiting on my brother." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine," Margaret said simply. "You look hungry. Have you eaten today?" He paused, and that pause told her everything. "There's a diner about half a mile up the road," she said. "Nothing fancy, but they do good eggs." "I appreciate it, ma'am, but I don't have any money on me right now. Someone got my wallet earlier." Margaret opened her coat pocket. She looked at the $10 sitting there. She thought about the next 4 days. She thought about her own near-empty fridge. She thought about all the very practical reasons why she should put that money back and just walk home. Then she held it out to him. "Take it," she said. Ray stared at her. "Ma'am, I can't take your money." "I didn't ask if you could," she said. "I told you to take it. Go get something warm in your stomach. You've got a long wait ahead." Ray looked at the $10. Then he looked at this small, white-haired woman in her worn winter coat, with her grocery bag, standing on the side of the road like she had all the time in the world. "You sure?" he asked quietly. "I wouldn't have taken it out of my pocket if I wasn't," she said. He took the money, and Margaret could see it in his eyes, not just gratitude, but something almost like shame. The kind of shame a proud man feels when a stranger shows him grace he didn't ask for. "I'll pay you back," he said. "I promise." "Don't worry about it," Margaret said. She picked up her grocery bag. "Take care of yourself, honey." And she walked home. She didn't think about it again. That's the thing about people like Margaret, they don't give and then sit around waiting to be rewarded. She went home, made her soup, watched her evening shows, and went to bed. The next 4 days were tight. She stretched that bread as far as it could go. She skipped a couple of meals she didn't really skip. She just told herself she wasn't that hungry. But she was okay. She had been okay through harder things than this. What she didn't know, what she had absolutely no idea about, was what was happening on the other side of town. Ray's brother picked him up 2 hours later, just like he'd said. They loaded the bike onto a trailer and drove to Knoxville. Ray showered, ate, slept. The next morning, he was already thinking about the woman on the road. He asked around, called the one diner in Millbrook, described her. The woman who worked the counter, her name was Carol, knew exactly who he was talking about. That's Margaret Ellis, Carol said. Sweet woman. Comes in sometimes, but not often. Lives alone out on Birchwood Lane since she lost her husband. Ray thanked her and hung up. Then he opened his phone and started typing in a group chat. It was a chat with 43 members. A motorcycle club called the Iron Road Brotherhood. A group of riders from across Tennessee who had been riding together for over 15 years. They raised money for veterans. They did charity rides. They showed up for people. That was their whole thing, showing up for people. Ray typed out what had happened. Every detail. The broken down bike. The empty wallet. The cold morning. And the 73-year-old woman who gave away her last $10 without being asked and walked away like it was nothing. The chat exploded. Within 20 minutes, 42 out of 43 members had responded. And every single response said the same thing. We're going. They spent 3 days organizing. Ray made calls. Members reached into their own pockets. A few local businesses in their network heard the story and wanted to help. A hardware store owner donated supplies. A grocery chain manager pulled together gift cards. Someone connected them with a local contractor who specialized in home repair for elderly residents, a man named Steve Briggs, who had been doing this kind of work quietly for years because, as he put it, somebody's gotta. Steve drove out to Birchwood Lane before the visit. He walked around the outside of Margaret's house, just as an observer. He didn't knock. He just looked. The roof had missing shingles. The front porch steps were soft, dangerously soft. The gutters were pulling away from the fascia. The outside of the house hadn't been painted in what looked like 15 years. He called Ray that night. This woman needs more than a visit, he said. She needs real work done. Then we do real work, Ray said. That's going to cost money. Then we raise money. They set up a small fundraiser within their network. No social media. No viral campaign. Just word of mouth among people who knew people. In 48 hours, they had raised enough to cover a full exterior repair, new porch steps, gutter replacement, and a winter weatherproofing job that would cut Margaret's heating bills significantly. They bought $400 in grocery gift cards. They put together a basket with her medicine. They had asked around and someone knew what she took, refilled. For 3 months, they bought her a new coat, warm and thick, because someone who'd seen her said hers looked like it, belonged to a different decade. And on a Saturday morning, 10 days after Margaret handed Ray that $10 bill on the side of the road, they came. Margaret was in her kitchen when she heard it. At first she thought it was thunder, that low, rolling rumble that builds before a storm. But the sky outside her window was completely clear. She set down her coffee cup and walked to her front door. She opened it, and what she saw stopped her completely. Coming down Birchwood Lane, in a long, steady procession that seemed to go on forever, were motorcycles. 50 of them, riding 2 by 2, engines low, moving slowly and deliberately, like a parade that had her name on it. Neighbors had come out of their houses. A few people stood on their porches, watching with wide eyes and open mouths. The motorcycles pulled up in front of Margaret's house and stopped, one after another, filling the entire street. Engines cutting off in sequence until the rumble faded into silence. And then, from the middle of the group, Ray Coulter walked forward. He was carrying a large envelope and a gift basket. Behind him, the other riders were already moving, some heading toward the porch with tool bags, some unloading supplies from a trailer hitched to one of the bikes, some just standing respectfully at a distance. Margaret stood on her porch, that soft, dangerous porch, with one hand over her mouth and tears already running down her face. She had no idea. She had completely, genuinely no idea. "Ma'am," Ray said, stopping at the bottom of her steps. He looked up at her. This big, broad man with the gray beard and the leather jacket and his eyes were wet. "You gave me everything you had," he said, "and you walked away like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing to me. It was everything." He held out the envelope. "This is from all of us." Margaret took it with shaking hands. Inside was a card signed by every single member of the Iron Road. Brotherhood, 50 names, 50 short messages. Some of them just a few words. Some of them entire paragraphs, and a check. She looked at the number, and she sat down right there on her porch step, that soft, rotting step that Steve Briggs was already measuring for replacement. And she cried. Not sad crying. Not the kind of crying she did alone in her kitchen at night when the house got too quiet. This was different. This was the kind of crying that comes when something you stopped believing in suddenly shows up at your front door with 50 motorcycles and a signed card and a new coat. The riders stayed the entire day. Steve and 4 volunteers replaced the porch steps in under 2 hours. Solid. Safe. Perfect. Another team worked on the gutters. 2 men got up on the roof and started replacing shingles with a speed and care that made the neighbors come over just to watch. Someone had brought food, a full spread, enough for everyone. They set it up in Margaret's backyard on folding tables, and by noon, her yard looked like the best block party Birchwood Lane had ever seen. Margaret sat in a lawn chair in the middle of it all, wrapped in her new coat, even though it was warm enough not to need it. She put it on anyway, and she talked and laughed and cried a little more and accepted more hugs from large, bearded men than she had in years. Her daughter called at 2 in the afternoon because a neighbor had taken a photo of the motorcycles filling the street, and it had made its way to Portland somehow. "Mom," her daughter said, voice breaking. "What is happening?" "Honey," Margaret said, laughing through tears, "I have absolutely no idea. But it's wonderful." By evening, the work was done. The groceries were stocked. The medicine basket was inside on the kitchen counter. The house looked different, looked cared for, in a way it hadn't in years. The riders gathered on the street one last time before leaving. Ray walked up to Margaret one more time. "We're going to check on you," he said. "That's not a polite thing people say. We actually mean it. Steve is going to come back next month and check the roof again. And if you ever need anything, anything at all, you have my number now." Margaret looked at him for a long moment. "You know what I keep thinking about?" she said. "What's that?" "I almost walked past you," she said quietly. "I almost told myself it wasn't my business, that I couldn't afford it." She shook her head slowly. $10. I was going to protect $10. Ray smiled. "And instead you changed 50 people's lives. Because every single one of us is going to carry this story forever. Every time we think about not stopping, not helping, not giving, we're going to think about you." Margaret reached up and patted his hand the way grandmothers do. That small, firm, certain pat. "Go safe," she said. "All of you." And one by one, the engine started again. That same rolling thunder she had heard that morning. But now it sounded different. Now it sounded like something she would remember for the rest of her life. She stood on her new porch steps and watched them until the last motorcycle disappeared around the bend. And then she stood there a little longer. The street was quiet again. The neighbors had gone back inside. The sun was setting behind the tree line at the end of Birchwood Lane, painting everything in that soft orange that only October evenings can do. Margaret looked at her house. The fixed roof, the new gutters, the solid steps under her feet. She thought about Donald. She thought about how he used to say, whenever she did something kind that cost her more than she could afford, he used to say, "Maggie, you can't outgive this world. It always gives back." She had never stopped believing that. Not really. Even in the hard years. Even in the lonely years. And today, the world had shown up on her street with 50 motorcycles to prove him right. Here is what this story is really about. It is not about money. It is not about motorcycles. It is not even about Margaret, really. It is about what happens when one person decides to be human. Fully, completely, without waiting to be asked. Margaret did not give because she had extra. She gave because someone needed it. That is the only reason. No calculation. No expectation. No wondering if she would be paid back. And the world responded the only way it knows how to respond to that kind of love. It came back multiplied. There are people in your life right now, maybe not on the side of a road, maybe not with a broken down motorcycle, but stuck, quietly struggling, getting through their days the way Margaret got through hers, without telling anyone, without asking for anything, just putting one foot in front of the other and hoping the next day is a little easier. You might not have 50 riders behind you. You might not be able to replace someone's roof, but you have something. And whatever you have, even if it's just $10, even if it's just 5 minutes, even if it's just the decision to stop and ask someone if they are okay, that thing you have is enough to start a chain of events you will never be able to predict. Margaret never predicted any of this. She just stopped walking.